The forest behind Miltown was a place people avoided after dark. Old stories said wolves lived deep in those trees. Wolves that were not quite ordinary. Parents warned their children not to wander past the stream. Hunters set traps along the tree line, hoping to catch something valuable. But Lyra Hastings had never been afraid of the woods. She had grown up wandering them, gathering herbs for her mentor, an old healer named Agnes, who had taught her everything she knew about roots, leaves, and the quiet art of mending what was broken. Lyra was 24 years old, with steady hands, and a heart that could not walk past someone in pain, whether that someone had 2 legs or 4. The villagers respected her, though they sometimes whispered that she was too soft, too willing to help people who could not repay her. She did not care what they whispered. She only cared about doing what felt right. That evening, she stayed in the forest longer than she meant to, searching for a rare yellow root that grew near the old stream. By the time she noticed the sky darkening, the sun had already slipped behind the hills. She hurried along the path, her basket heavy on her arm, when she heard it. A low, pained sound, almost like a whimper, coming from somewhere off the trail. She should have kept walking. Every lesson she had ever been taught told her to keep walking. Instead, she stepped off the path and followed the sound through the brush until she found him. A wolf, large and gray, lay on his side near the roots of an old oak tree. One of his back legs was caught in an iron trap, the metal teeth biting into his flesh. Blood soaked the ground beneath him. His breathing was fast and shallow, his eyes half closed, as if he had already given up hope of being found by anything other than the hunters who had set the trap. Lyra's first instinct was fear. Any sensible person would have run. But when the wolf lifted his head and looked at her, she saw something in his eyes that was not the fury she expected. It was exhaustion. It was pain. It was something close to pleading. "Easy," she whispered, setting her basket down slowly. "I am not here to hurt you." The wolf's ears flattened, but he did not growl. He did not snap at her when she knelt beside him, though every part of his body must have screamed at him to defend himself. Lyra reached for the trap with trembling hands, working the rusted latch until it finally gave way with a sharp click. The wolf let out a sound of relief so human that it startled her. She tore strips from the edge of her own cloak and wrapped them tightly around his wounded leg, pressing hard enough to slow the bleeding. The wolf watched her the entire time, still and quiet, as if he understood exactly what she was doing and why. "There is an old shepherd's hut not far from here," she said, more to herself than to him. "No one uses it anymore. You will be safe there, at least for tonight." She did not know how she managed to help him limp through the trees, his weight leaning against her side, but somehow they reached the hut before full darkness fell. She laid down a bed of dry straw for him in the corner and promised she would return the next day with food and clean water. What Lyra did not know, what she could not have known, was that the wolf she had saved was not simply a wolf. He was Cale Ashbourne, Alpha King of the Blackthorn Pack, a leader whose true form commanded fear and loyalty across every territory bordering Miltown. He had shifted that evening against the advice of his own council, choosing to scout the border alone after hunters had grown bolder in recent weeks, setting traps closer and closer to pack land. He had not expected to be caught. He had not expected to be found by a human girl with gentle hands and no fear in her eyes. He also had not expected to feel, in that moment of pain and helplessness, a relief so deep it frightened him more than the trap ever could. The truth was, Cale had known Lyra long before that night. For over a year, he had watched her from the ridge above the village, in his wolf form, hidden among the trees where no human eye could find him. He had seen her slip bread and medicine to families who could not afford to pay for either. He had seen her scold a group of men twice her size for mistreating a stray dog, standing her ground without a trace of fear. He had seen her sit alone by the stream some evenings, talking softly to the water as though it might answer her back, and something about her quiet, unguarded heart had settled into his chest and refused to leave. He had never approached her. He was Alpha King, and she was human. His council would have called it foolish, even dangerous, for their leader to feel anything for someone outside the pack. So he had watched from a distance, telling himself it meant nothing, until the night the trap closed around his leg, and the only person who came to help him was the one person he had been trying not to think about. Over the following days, Lyra returned to the hut morning and evening, bringing food, clean water, and fresh bandages. She talked to the wolf as she worked, telling him about her day, about the villagers, about Agnes, and her endless list of remedies. She had no way of knowing he understood every word, that he listened more closely to her voice than he had ever listened to anything in his life. "You are a good listener," she told him one evening, laughing softly at herself for speaking to an animal, as though he were a person. "Better than most people, honestly." The wolf huffed, and if she had looked closely, she might have thought it sounded almost like a quiet laugh. As his leg healed, Kale found himself facing an impossible choice. He could shift back into his human form and reveal the truth, or he could remain silent and continue watching her care for him without her ever knowing who he truly was. He told himself he would explain everything once he was strong enough to leave, but each day that passed made the truth harder to speak. He worried that the moment she learned he was Alpha King, everything between them would change. She had been kind to a wounded wolf, not to a king. He did not want her kindness to turn into fear, or worse, into the same careful distance the villagers gave to power they did not understand. At night, when Lyra had gone home and the hut was quiet, Kale sometimes shifted back into his human form, just long enough to stretch muscles unused to walking on two legs. He never let her see him that way. He told himself it was to protect her, to protect the pack, to protect the fragile trust growing between them. In truth, he was afraid that revealing himself would end the only honest connection he had ever known. Meanwhile, back in Blackthorn territory, the pack grew restless. Their alpha had been gone far longer than expected, and rumors spread quickly among restless wolves. Some whispered that Kale had been captured. Others, more dangerous, began to wonder if the pack needed a new leader altogether. A rival pack from the eastern hills, sensing weakness, began testing the borders, growing bolder with each passing day. Kale knew he could not stay hidden much longer. His leg had healed enough to bear weight, though it still ached with every step. He knew he needed to return, to reassure his pack and secure the borders before the eastern wolves grew too confident. But leaving meant leaving Lyra, and leaving without ever telling her the truth felt like a betrayal he could not carry. He decided he would tell her everything the next evening. He would shift in front of her, explain who he was, and accept whatever came after, whether it was her trust or her fear. But the hunters returned first. They had noticed the missing trap, the drag marks leading away from the tree line, and they had grown suspicious of the healer's apprentice, who spent her evenings wandering near the old shepherd's hut. That evening, as Lyra approached with a basket of food, 3 hunters stepped out from the trees, blocking her path. They accused her of hiding an injured wolf, of interfering with their work, of putting the entire village at risk by protecting a dangerous animal. "Step aside," one of them warned, raising a crossbow. "The wolf is ours to finish." Lyra stood her ground, her heart pounding, but she did not move. "He has done nothing to any of you. Let him be." The hunter's finger tightened on the trigger, and in that instant, everything Kale had been protecting, his identity, his pride, his careful distance, meant nothing at all. He burst from the hut, moving faster than his healing leg should have allowed, placing himself directly between Lyra and the arrow meant to strike her down. The crossbow bolt grazed his shoulder instead, and before the hunters could reload, Kale did something he had never done in front of a human before. He shifted. Fur receded into skin, 4 legs became 2, and where a wounded gray wolf had stood a moment before, now stood a man, tall and unmistakably regal despite the blood on his shoulder and the wildness in his eyes. The hunters froze, then turned and fled into the trees, unwilling to face whatever power they had just witnessed. Lyra stood in stunned silence, staring at the man before her, at the same steady gray eyes she had come to know so well over the past days, now set in a human face. "You," she whispered, "you are the wolf." "I am," Kale said quietly, wincing as he pressed a hand to his wounded shoulder. "My name is Kale Ashbourne. I am Alpha King of the Blackthorn Pack." For a moment, Lyra felt something close to betrayal rise in her chest. She had spent days speaking to him as though he were simply an injured animal, sharing her private thoughts, her worries, pieces of herself she rarely gave to anyone. Had it all been some kind of game to him? "Why did you not tell me?" she asked, her voice tight. "Because I needed to know," Kale said. "Whether you would have helped me, even if you had known who I was from the beginning. Whether your kindness was for a king, or simply for someone in pain." Lyra studied his face, searching for deception, and finding none. She thought of every quiet evening in the hut, every moment he had listened without judgment, every small comfort he had offered simply by being present. None of that had felt false. It had felt like the truest connection she had ever known. "You could have told me sooner," she said, softer now. "I know," Kale admitted. "I was afraid. Afraid that once you knew who I was, you would see a king instead of the wolf you saved. I did not want that to change what was between us." Lyra stepped closer, her anger giving way to something gentler. "It does not change anything," she said. "I did not save you because of a crown. I saved you because you needed help. That is still true, whether you are a wolf or a king." Kale's council, when they finally arrived to escort their alpha home, were furious to learn he had risked his safety and the safety of the pack's leadership for a human girl. They argued late into the night, insisting that such an attachment was unworthy of a king, dangerous even, a weakness their enemies could exploit. Kale listened to every argument, then rose and spoke with a calm certainty that silenced the room. "A leader who lets fear decide who he is allowed to love is not fit to lead at all," he said. "I did not choose Lyra because it was easy. I chose her because she showed me more courage and honesty than anyone in this pack has shown me in years. If that makes me unfit in your eyes, then perhaps your eyes are the ones that need to change." The council fell silent, and in time, even the most stubborn among them came to see what Kale had seen from the very beginning, watching from the ridge above the village. Lyra's kindness was not weakness. It was strength of a rare and quiet kind. Lyra was given a choice. She could return to her life in the village and forget the strange days spent healing a wolf who turned out to be a king, or she could stay and step into a world far larger and stranger than anything she had ever imagined. She thought of Agnes, of the village, of the quiet life she had always known, but she also thought of the steady gray eyes that had watched her with such gentle patience, of the wolf who had thrown himself in front of an arrow without a moment's hesitation. She had not fallen for a king. She had fallen for the one who trusted her before he ever told her his name. "I am staying," she said. "Not for the title, not for the crown. I already loved you before I knew any of that." Kale smiled, the first truly unguarded smile she had seen since his secret came to light. "Then let us build something new," he said. "A pack, and a village, that no longer live in fear of each other." Together, they stood at the border between human land and wolf territory, a line that had divided two worlds for generations. Kale promised to tear down the old rules that had kept them apart, and Lyra promised to keep doing what she had always done, offering help to anyone who needed it, wolf or man, without asking what they could give her in return. The border remained, marked by old stones and older stories, but it no longer felt like a wall. It felt, for the first time, like the beginning of a bridge.